This is the movie Insurrectionist, and this is your host, Rashad, the movie Insurrectionist. I'm continuing with my series of our fallen brother, Carl Weathers, and I want to deal with another one of his films. This one is probably not as well known as his other movies, but I think you should watch it. It is his most underrated film, and that is, of course, Action Jackson. Action Jackson was produced by Joel Silver, the same guy that produced Predator, Die Hard, Commando, Lethal Weapon, and many other big-time 80s action movies. Carl Weathers was so instrumental in many of the 80s action films during this time, they wrote a movie that was primarily meant for him, and it took place within the city of Detroit, which happens to be the same location of Beverly Hills Cop and RoboCop, two other 80s films that were popular during that era. Action Jackson didn't flinch from the African-American influence of Detroit. It's one of the rare action movies of the 80s that had a plethora of black characters who weren't just sideline accessories. Carl Weathers stars as the titular character, Action Jackson, or Jericho Action Jackson, a man that's an Ivy League educated cop, has a law degree from Harvard, and was a college track star, which comes in handy later in the movie. However, he is a detective in the Detroit Police Department who was demoted for not following procedures. He gets his name Action because of his over-the-top antics and how he captures criminals. He basically blows up and destroys everything he comes into contact with within his typical popcorn 80s action movie, which had men with big muscles, larger-than-life stunts, and ridiculous plots. I have to say that if you've actually seen this film, you have no choice but to love it. This movie is very underrated. It's the kind of film that's now considered to be a cult classic. Now, one of the things about this movie is that it not only had Carl Weathers, but it had another 80s icon, Vandy, who was part of the group Vandy 6, produced by Prince. She was one of Prince's proteges along with Sheena E. and Apollonia, who starred alongside Prince in the iconic movie Purple Rain, which I actually need to make a video for in another segment. But anyway, Vandy stars as Sydney, a drug-addicted singer that is the mistress of the antagonist Peter Delaplane, played by Craig T. Nelson. Peter Delaplane is a car mogul and is involved in all sorts of illicit activity being covered up by his array of car dealerships in Detroit. In this story, Delaplane has several high-profile union bosses killed because he wishes to take control of the union himself. Once Action Jackson gets wind of this, Delaplane frames Action Jackson by placing his wife, who he murdered, played by unknown Sharon Stone, in his apartment. This is where all the fun begins. While being accompanied by Sydney, Action must evade his police associates long enough to clear his name. He maneuvers through Detroit while obtaining information from his acquaintances from his humble beginnings. Of course, this being an 80s action movie, there are all sorts of usual set pieces such as a brawl in a bar, a fight against Native American where he throws them from one building to another. And of course, Action Jackson drives a car up the stairs in a mansion, and he blows up a man with a grenade launcher after repeating the lines, "How do you like your ribs?" The only problem with this film is that Action Jackson doesn't show how he got his name until the second act when he jumps over a taxi cab. He takes too much time to get into action, no pun intended. Other than that, I thought this was a typical 80s action movie that was a starring role for Carl Weathers. Unfortunately, there was no sequel because the film rights were sold to Sony. Nevertheless, this remains to be a cult classic, and I think it belongs in the same category as other Joel Silver action films of this era. And I give Action Jackson 4 out of 5 stars and a big thumbs up. Thanks for joining us here, The Movie Insurrectionist. I am your host, Rashad, The Movie Insurrectionist. And remember, the theatrical release will not be televised. Take care of yourselves.